Hey, good looking, it's your boy, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday, the 21st of June. Fresh off a weekend of low-key fights. Wasn't a big one, but there were a couple on. Rory McDonald beat Gleison Tibau, and then Gleison Tibau won the decision in a bizarre reversal of fortunes. Because you'll remember that Gleison Tibau beat Khabib Nurmagomedov and lost that decision. So I suppose he was owed one, but a bit sad for Rory. But it confirms that, lateral raises are the best base for MMA. Stop wasting your time doing things like sparring. And cap your delts instead. Not the best base for getting vaccinated, though. They did me and they bent the needle. What we're talking about? Korean Zombie versus Dan Ige. That's the important one from this weekend. Probably the best, the most relevant. Stuff might come out of it. Can I shock you? Dan Ige had a bad game plan, and Diego Lima got knocked out along the fence. Well, who could have seen those two things coming? No, Dan Ige, again, proved to be a guy who can go toe-to-toe with the best guys in the division, but will do it in a dumb way. It was very strange because he's got, is it Eric Nixick? His name's Nixick, but Nixick in his corner, and Nixick has been long regarded as a very good coach, but they just really had no effective game plan for this one. And a large part of it was, as Dominic Cruz and Michael Bisping pointed out throughout the fight, the complete lack of feints from Dan Ige. Like, when I call someone's style honest, that's a little bit of a backhanded compliment because it just means that they're going to show you what they're doing straight up and do it. And being a really good striker, there are like honest strikers who do very, very well. But being like a really crafty striker is all about smoke and mirrors. And all Dan Ige ever really wants to do is like throw a couple of punches and dart out the side door, or do that weird like shift step into southpaw and try and hit people with his left hand. Which is all very good, but the Korean Zombie was waiting for him and trying to counter him, and there was nothing to make the Korean Zombie swing at air. If you're dealing with really good counterpunchers, a really good example is someone like Mark Hunt, who was always really powerful, started to become more of a counterpuncher towards the more successful end of his career, in MMA that is, and then it fell apart when he started to meet people who could make him swing at air, because he's swinging, hundreds of pounds of force, but he's throwing himself out of position to do it. And a lot of counterpunchers get into counterpunching because it's a way you can load up your punches. If you're leading, the more time you have on your punches, the more time the opponent has to get away from them. That's why most good offensive fighters have to get good at, well, first straight hitting really, really fast, but also using the jab and things like that, and feinting, which is again what we're talking about. But they have to get good at hiding those big swings. Whereas if you're a counterpuncher, your swing is hidden by the guy getting like tunnel vision towards you and opening up with his own blows. So the Korean Zombie spent this entire fight leaning on his lead leg and putting his chin out in front of him with his left hand down and waiting for Dan Ige to throw at him. And what would happen was Dan Ige would throw a jab at him, and then Dan Ige would throw another jab and step in, and the Korean Zombie would clap him on the side of the head with a left hook, or come back with a right hand. And it never really advanced beyond that stage because Dan Ige's timing never really changed that much. It was just, here's what I'm doing, I'm going to try and do it faster because you're countering me. When really, if you looked at what the Korean Zombie was doing, firstly, he was presenting his lead leg, and Ige, it was another one where I was like, how many low kicks did that guy even throw? And I went and checked the stats on Fight Metric or UFC Stats or whatever it was. 13 thrown, 11 landed. So incredibly good connection rate. There were two, literally two, when the Korean Zombie pulled his leg out of the way and Dan Ige threw himself out of position, and then he got worried about it and didn't really go back to it. And there was a body kick in round 4, I think it was, that he got taken down off. But that's a body kick, that's something different. We're talking about low kicks. And yeah, Jung's leg was there the entire time until he pulled it away because he knew the kick was coming. And that is where the dude should have been mixing up what he's doing. Flick out a jab, throw a low kick. Feint the low kick, come in with a 1-2. Those are the change-ups that are going to fuck with a counter-striker, even if you're not like effectively shoulder feinting and stuff and mixing up your timings. Just mix up the actual techniques that are coming. If they look enough like each other, you'll do well. But not even like specifically how Korean Zombie was fighting in this fight. He's had a lot of trouble with low kicks in the past. Not so much against Jose Aldo, who broke his toes on the first kick against Korean Zombie, but like the one against Yair Rodriguez. just sneezed and exploded my front of my head. But the Yair Rodriguez one, he was landing low kicks basically at will. I think Ortega did some good kicking in their fight too. The Korean Zombie doesn't really kick as much. He's very obsessed with the landing counterpunches. So when I say the low kick's there, I don't mean, the low kick is there for free all the time, every time. that's just a silly way to think about it. But the low kick was there an awful lot because of how the Korean Zombie was standing in hopes of drawing punches and countering. And that's when you've got to show him punches that aren't close enough and kick him in the leg, or get him thinking about the kick, and when he retracts his leg, to follow him with punches, or just feint and let him pull his leg back for nothing. The Korean Zombie is he doesn't like wasting moves a lot. He's very chill, standing there in front of you and trying to get you to come to him. But it was the Korean Zombie's wrestling that really made the difference. Ige wasn't that effective when he did wrestle. We did say it would be good to see him wrestle, but I didn't see the Korean Zombie having such an edge in that area of combat. But again, a lot of it came from how the striking was playing out. You could double leg John Jones if you got him in a bad enough position, probably. Think of Alexander Gustafsson, when he parried an oblique kick from John Jones, crossed his legs over them, and then took him down. Because John Jones, when John Jones is wrestling a dude, he's John Jones. But when John Jones is out of position, he's a guy who's out of position. I mean, he's still John Jones, but he's much less John Jones than he's normally John Jones. I'll stop saying John Jones now. But yes, Jung did a great job of getting him out of position for these. Like he did the first takedown, he did a level change and an uppercut left hook right overhand. And then he level changed again as Ige came back at him and took him down. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then he just kept timing little level changes and double legs throughout the fight. Just like occasionally at the right time. It wasn't an awful lot of takedowns, but when he got them, he made them last. Like the third round was basically spent entirely off the first takedown. Korean Zombie getting on Ige's back, Ige defending his throat well, but still the guy's on your back for the whole round. You're not going to win it. When Ige came back into the fight, was in the fifth round. He did really well with the body shots. Have always liked that about his game. And then that opened up attempts at takedowns for him as well. But really, there's two things about this. Like, specific game plan for this fight seemed bad, and generally he comes in with game plans that aren't, even if they go really well, he sort of edges out a victory, and you're looking at him going, you are more physically talented than these performances are allowing you to show. And the second thing is, like, he just needs to be able to learn to feint effectively, and that's an art. There's a reason that Israel Adesanya and well, I can say people like him, but there aren't that many like him in MMA who consistently feint and make it part of their movement throughout the fight, are so special. Because it isn't much. Like, you don't waste a lot of energy moving your hip or moving your shoulder, and you get a lot out of the opponent, or you dull their reactions altogether and can start sneaking stuff through. But doing it convincingly really does take work. Because I can't count the number of people I've met just in gyms and also seen in fights who are like, the feint twice and then go on the third one, where you're like shoulder feint, and then real attack that looks nothing like the shoulder feint. It's just, and it's I'm guilty of it too. I'm sure so many people are guilty of it, but it's very hard to be convincing when you're feinting, especially once you get to the higher levels of fighting. But any sort of feinting here would have thrown off the Korean Zombie a good amount. So what else was on? Sergey Spivak versus Alexei Oleinik. Oh, bad fight. But bad fight in a good way. I always say that my favourite Gertrude Stein line, which she didn't actually write, which is probably why it's my favourite line of hers, but in A Movable Feast, Ernest Hemingway recounts her saying, "You should only read what is truly good or frankly bad." And I've always thought that about fights. I don't want to waste my time with, like, okay fights. I want to see the really good ones, and I want to see the really bad ones. And this one was comical, so I enjoyed it quite a bit. Just Alexei Oleinik walking forward onto punches and then surprisingly catching Spivak while Spivak thought he was putting on a boxing clinic, but also at the speed of a glacier. Very, very funny. And then Alexei Oleinik's ground game is just hilarious. Like, he managed to get to Sergey Spivak's back, and he did the Marcelo Garcia sit to crab hooks, or a crab ride. The crab ride is like where you put, if you've got the opponent in a back body lock, you're behind them with your hands locked around them. You put like butterfly hooks in the back of their knees and you sit down. And that's a big thing in wrestling. I think the Askarans were good at it. There's a number of guys who've been really good at it. It's become a big thing in jiu-jitsu because it plays in with the berimbolo. And if you watch Gregor Gillespie versus Yancy Medeiros, Gillespie just ragdolls him around by this, like sitting on crab hooks, coming up into leg drags and things like that. The Meow Brothers, really good at using the crab hooks from the bottom and then coming up into leg drag passes. But it linked in with something that Marcelo Garcia used to do. If you watch my Filthy Casuals Guide to Marcelo Garcia, I think it's in there. He's wrestling like Gabriel Gonzaga, who is 100 and something pounds heavier than him. He arm drags him, gets around behind him in a back body lock, and Gabriel Gonzaga's sort of like, okay, but what are you going to do from here? Like, you're not going to pick me up and mat return me. And Marcelo Garcia stands, like, jumps up and puts the soles of his feet in the creases of the back of Gonzaga's knees and pulls him backwards. It's just amazing. He did it to Rico Rodriguez in ADCC as well. It's a really nasty move. But Oleinik did similar to that with the crab rides, slowly pulled Spivak on top of him and then put in his hooks while the team were like talking about how he's going to put in his hooks. They were doing it, and it happened basically in slow-mo. It was like he was assisting them by demonstrating what they were talking about. And then he came up onto mount and just won the round. And the third round was garbage. There was a really weird moment like in the second round where Oleinik pulled him down on top of him into half guard. Got the lockdown, got the underhook, pulled back into butterfly guard, and you're like, damn, those were some really nice transitions. What are you going to do with it? And he didn't do anything with it. Like, it was really nice transitions to get out of pulling the guy into mount. Yeah, I mean, I love Oleinik, but I also do want him to go away now. I think a retirement would be nice. But, you know, this is the thing. He's going to lose 3-4 in a row. And then he's going to submit some bum, because there's always a bum around in the heavyweight division. And we'll all go, oh my God, I can't believe it. He's the best. Keep him around forever. And then that cycle will replay itself over and over and over again. But Marlon Vera versus Davey Grant, that was money. I said that fight would be good, and it was good. Honestly, that one should have been 5 rounds. That should have been a main event. Or a 5-round not main event, as we're doing now. But Marlon Vera did his pressure stuff, and Davey Grant did his weird striking stuff. What I liked about Grant was I thought he looked a lot more effective in the early going than his last one, where he got sort of obsessed with that switch to southpaw right uppercut. And that was just all he showed, and he didn't land it until he finally did in the third round and knocked the guy out. But in this one, he was actually working effectively for the full length of the fight. What I really liked was he was going up and down, but he was throwing right straights, left straights to the body, and wide rights and left hooks to the body as well. But the amount he was landing to the body was more than he was landing to the head, so it was going well for him. And it opened up opportunities for him to hit the body and come up with the left hook to the head. And he really had Marlon Vera sort of staring at him in that first round. He didn't really know what to do. And in the second round, Marlon Vera, it was kind of like the Song Yadong fight where he just gritted his way back into it. And basically, Marlon Vera, he needs to be told, you are really good at fighting on the inside. If you get there, you will probably win. just grit your teeth and get through it. Because he's standing on the outside with Davey Grant trying to kickbox with him, and he's getting outlanded. And then the second round, Davey Grant opens up with a wide right and a left hook to the body, really digs in, and Marlon Vera covers up, takes him, and then just slips his hand around the back of Davey Grant's head. And the moment I saw that his hand was on the back of this guy's head, I was like, oh, fuck, he's in for it now. Because then he comes out of that cover-up, just 3 elbows in a row, slices Davey Grant's head open, and then he's in it. He's in the fight from that point on. Good low kicks, good front kicks. The front kick has always been a mark of Chito Vera. The stance switching has always been a mark of Chito Vera. But what he does really well is strike from the range where he can hold people. And when he got there, Davey Grant was in real trouble. There was a moment in the third round where Davey Grant was pretty gassed, and Davey Grant pulled him into a clinch, which is a great idea. Normally, if you're gassed, pull someone into a clinch. And you could see him go, fuck, about halfway through, because he pulled him into the clinch, and then Marlon Vera started kneeing him. And honestly, I thought he was going to get finished there, but he managed to get through it. There was a really strange moment in the first round where Davey Grant got a kick caught, and instead of trying to fight off the single leg, he pulled Vera in and just jumped to close guard. He did get up almost immediately afterwards, which was good, but it takes some balls to do that. Actually, on the subject of guard, I forgot to mention Chan Sung Jung's passing. Very similar to what BJ Penn used to do it, but something that Charles Oliveira is doing now too, which is if you can get the guy's taint pointing at the ceiling, you're pretty much past. And you're never going to be able to do that in, no-gi grappling or whatever. You might do it in the gi because they might put themselves in spider guard, and then part of it is like getting the hooks off your biceps and pointing their taint to the ceiling. But in MMA, where guys are trying to upkick the whole time, if you, you'll notice Jung does it, but BJ Penn used to do it too, and again, Charles Oliveira does it, but they sort of stand over the guy in guard, and they move in sideways behind their hip, like really side on and their head back. And the more the guy tries to upkick at them, the more they sort of wedge their lead leg in underneath the guy's butt, and then eventually a kick will miss, and they'll just push the ankles back and stack the guy up, and he'll roll over his shoulders, and you'll get the front headlock, or you might pass or whatever. But Jung did it about 3 times to Dan Ige in this fight, and it's not like really tight stack passing. It's not like Jacare did it recently, or Keenan Cornelius is amazing in Nogi doing stack passing. You're not like keeping tight to the guy, but you are technically stack passing him just by pushing his ankles up over his head. And he's doing most of the work for you because he's kicking himself into that position. But back to Vera versus Grant. That's going to fuck up my timestamps. Elbows and knees were lush in this one. Grappling was good. There was a really interesting moment where Davey Grant turned him over by a front headlock, like a rolling arm in guillotine, and Marlon Vera just pulled his own foot up across Grant's leg and threatened a heel hook and came up on top. It was really cool. I just loved this fight. Grant slowed down a lot by the end, and Vera really poured it on towards the end of the fight, and that's what Marlon Vera does. You just got to think Marlon Vera would do so much better if he just could get going a bit sooner. I mean, he's got a lot of first-round finishes on his record, but against really good guys like Song Yudong and Davey Grant, it's been that first round that he's really let himself down in, or not even let himself down in, but just not got going in. And as an aside, I love that he says, I was sticking him with the yab. And I went in there and got the yob done. Actually, there was some stuff coming out of that gym this week about Sean Strickland and Orlando Sanchez getting into a fight on the mats in a wrestling session. And I've written something about that, and I'm going to put that up shortly after this podcast. So if you're a Patreon boy, go read that. It's an old-style Fightlandy ramble. What else was on this card? Seungwoo Choi knocked out Julian Erosa, got the knockout bonus for this. This was this wins the Frank Mir Prize for showing the same combination over and over and over again. Do you remember against Big Nog where he did the left straight right lead hand uppercut like a dozen times in a row, and Big Nog was like, I can't get away from it. This one, he just came out and he was like right straight left hook, and he goes, good thing that this guy's not picking up on that. But it worked. He got the knockout. Good for him. Bruno Silva versus Wellington Turman was a real fun fight. Actually, there's a load of Kimura stuff in this one, which is going to take me back again. Fuck, this is fucking all my timestamps. But Davey Grant got the Kimura from the bottom against Marlon Vera in round 3 when he was tired. And Marlon Vera tried to back off, and Davey Grant went to his knees to the turtle. And that was another example of that, using the Kimura from the bottom to get to the turtle. And then from there, you could try the Sakuraba stand-up. Matt Lindland, we always talk about, did a stand-up and switched off to a switch on Quinton Jackson. But Davey Grant was like, I want to try and finish this. So he fell to his back with the Kimura and it slipped free. And he basically pulled Vera onto mount. He went from half guard to turtle to mount. And it was not good. But yes, Wellington Turman did some really interesting grappling in this one. And Bruno Silva in his own right was doing some good, interesting stuff too. Wellington Turman got on his back very early. And Bruno Silva used the quad pod or the pike, whatever you want to call it, piked his hips up above his head and used his hands to dig Turman's hooks out and get him off his back. There was some really interesting wrestling along the fence. Turman was attacking a Kimura, and Silva was having to choose between like keeping his hands locked or trying to dig them between Turman's legs. Really nice mat returns from Turman at a couple of points. But he blew his load trying to tire this guy out grappling and tired himself out grappling. Ended up on the bottom. Bruno Silva seemed to realise that he was tired. And when Turman was in guard, he reached underneath Silva's leg to catch inside the thigh, which is a great way to start spinning into arm bars. And especially in like the modern age, Izzy did this the other day actually against Marvin Vettori. But if you throw up an arm bar by like grabbing inside the thigh and penduluming into it, and you let go of the arm, because you're probably not going to get the arm bar. But if you do that, you can turn to your knees with the guy's elbow on the other side of you. So he's completely off you basically, and you're on your knees, and you can just hit a stand-up or start trying to hit a stand-up. But there are other things you can do from there, like K-guard and all sorts of other stuff. So he's trying to triangle Bruno Silva from the bottom with a hand underneath Bruno Silva's thigh. And it gets stuck there because that's what happens. Like, you can set up cool guard passes from there. You can bait guys into it in sparring with punches. But he gets his hand trapped between Bruno Silva's hamstring and calf as Bruno Silva kneels back on it. And Bruno Silva just hits him with a little left hook on the chin, turns his chin all the way around, out like a light, hits him 3 more times. But it's such a danger in MMA because it's really powerful to dig underneath the thigh like that. And you'll see guys do it trying to get into deep half guard from regular half guard as well. But if you get stuck there, you've got no arm to protect that side of your face. Think Cain Velasquez versus Bigfoot or Jose Aldo versus Pequeno Nogueira. Both those guys, Bigfoot and Nogueira, both dug for deep half, but couldn't pull the guy on top of them. Or Shogun Rua versus John Jones. Couldn't pull the guy on top of them and just got elbowed in the head because they couldn't get their arm back. It was that, but from closed guard, or rather full guard, open guard. Matt Brown versus Diego Lima. Loved it. Lima standing on the fence, trying to low kick. Matt Brown trying to push the man to the fence because he's Matt Brown. Lima actually had some decent success in the first round, kicking Matt Brown's leg. But it was great to see Matt Brown doing what he does so well and not getting sparked in the process. I will do something on Matt Brown at some point, but Matt Brown is a great example of the kind of fighter who doesn't need a jab. I mean, you can always benefit from employing a jab, but because Matt Brown is constantly pressuring towards people and kicking his way in and stuff like that, but a lot of what he does is moving in on people, and when they move one way or other around the cage, he tries to hit them from that side. So the right-hand lead has always been a big part of his game. Like, he will time people stepping around and shoot his right. So basically, if you're squared up with someone normally, your right hand is normally going to be obstructed by their shoulder somewhat in a good boxing sort of setup. Less so if you're both very square and it's more of like a kickboxing sort of setup. But your right hand is normally going to be pretty easy to obstruct by just a little turn of the shoulder or a raise of the lead hand and a turn of the shoulder. But that's when you're throwing your right hand towards the opponent's center. You know, so your right hand is coming in from your right side to straight in front of you. One of the really slick ways that you'll watch people like Roy Jones and Gennady Golovkin land good straight rights is as the opponent is circling along the ropes, or strafing along the ropes, because it's not a circle, whereas the cage is. They wait for the opponent to come like directly in front of their right shoulder, so that they don't have to throw their right hand in. They just throw it right in front of their right shoulder. So at the moment the opponent's center line is in front of the right hand, that's when they want to land. And Matt Brown is very good at that. You can watch him do it to Eric Silva and plenty of others in his UFC run. But yeah, so he's been landing right-hand leads a lot throughout his career. But in the second round, Diego Lima stood still to throw a punch, really winged it, and Matt Brown just hit him with a short right lead on the chin. It was lovely. Ducked his head, and Lima didn't duck his. Enough, at least. He zagged when he should have zigged. It was a good shot. It was just like one in the course of a fight. But then that's what Matt Brown does. If he's overwhelming people, there's more chance of those sort of connections happening. And there's certainly more chance of people making errors, which is what Matt Brown really did at his best. I'm definitely going to do something on Matt Brown at his best now, because I absolutely loved Matt Brown. And he was getting a little bit sad because he was getting beaten quite a lot. You know, he's 41, 42, I think. Or maybe he's just 40. No, he said in the camera, not bad for 40, bitch. But, you know, he's got a lot of mileage on him, and he's old. But it was really refreshing to watch him win this. I mean, Diego Lima probably getting cut soon, but awesome stoppage from Matt Brown. Did we get a good trip in this one? Because I don't know if we got a good trip from Marlon Vera. You got two of the best trippers in MMA on the same card, and I don't know if we got a good trip. If we had Luke Bunmi on at the same time, that would have just rounded it out. Or over him, he's pretty good actually with trips from the clinch. So what else is worth talking about on this card? Probably not a lot else. Rick Glenn knocked out Joaquim Silva very, very quickly. This dude, like, again, it was like Diego Lima. He just got caught loading up. He did a nice knee raise and glided in behind it. But instead of keeping his hands and guard up, which is what you watch, like, I mean, obviously MMA is not Muay Thai, but if you watch a good Nak Muay come in behind, like, the raised knee, they're very tight. The point of raising the knee is that you don't have to do a lot to slide in behind it. And this guy raises his knee, and then as it comes down, he swings his right hand round like he's playing air guitar to load up for an overhand. And Rick Glenn just hits him with a little left straight on the chin and knocks him out, or knocks him down and finishes him with punches down there. Well, finishes is a bit of a... It was one of those ones where the guy was holding the leg, and you don't let go of the leg because then you've proved the referee's point that you weren't in the state to continue. But it was a bit of a harsh stoppage, I thought. But he did sort of go wobbly like twice. So I think that was pretty much everything I liked from that card, and bits that I didn't, like Spivak versus Oleinik. Let's do a question, and then we'll get out of here for today. Oh, we got a real in-the-weeds technical one. Dearest Mr. Slack, I'm asking this because I really want your take on it. How effective is the rear leg side kick in MMA? I'm not sure if I've seen anyone throw it in MMA, and I find this very odd. Maybe it's my bias from a Taekwondo background, but I see this as a viable move that is similar to the front kick but slower and more powerful due to the popping of the hips. Maybe I have a shitty back kick, but I do find the power generated similar to that of a back kick, which is way more common in MMA but a lot riskier. Or am I wrong here? I see a few clear advantages to this move that make me think it's an underutilized tool. 1. It can be thrown from a more conventional stance than the front leg side kick, as you inherently have to rotate your body. 2. You can mix this up with a round kick by bringing your knee up in the same manner. 3. You can land it with the heel or the ball of the foot. 4. You can catch people in the liver with it depending on the stances. Please let me know what you think of the viability and the reasons we don't see much of it. Thanks from Peter. Right, an example of this in action is Rose Namajunas. She threw it a couple of times against Carla Esparza in a losing effort, but she did. And then she threw it against Jessica Andrade the second time round. She's thrown it a couple of times. It's an interesting kick, and she does get some stank on it, which is what's impressive. The thing about the rear leg side kick is, yes, you are right. You don't... if you're throwing a lead leg side kick, typically you're going to have to blade your stance more, which again exposes you to the threat of the low kicks more, makes it more complicated to turn your knee out. You're taking yourself further away from a good check. Whereas a rear leg side kick, if you're standing in a normal stance with the toes pointing at the opponent and your hips a bit more square, you square your hips before you kick. So yeah, there is that. I mean, it's going to be even harder to do from a very side-on stance where most people who like side kicking anyway will probably go, because that's where you land your lead leg side kick from. It's kind of like guys who are good at the side kick are probably going to lock themselves out of the rear leg side kick by setting themselves up to throw the lead leg side kick better. You talked about some mix-ups, said you can land it with the heel or the ball of the foot. Those are okay selling points, but mainly just sort of every weapon really does that. You can catch people in the liver. I mean, that's true. If you can step off to your left side and hit the guy with the side kick coming at the angle, you could probably hit the liver, which would be nasty. I think you've hit on it a bit by mentioning the back kick, because people like Joe Rogan are very keen to point out that the back kick should really be a turning side kick. And there is a difference between the two. Like, a back kick tends to be brought up with like the knee either underneath you or if you're doing very traditional in front of you. But it's kicking behind you basically. Whereas a turning side kick is you turn into the side kick. But for most very good side kickers, the turning back kick will probably fill the hole of the rear leg side kick. The turning back kick is effectively the rear leg side kick because you've already got your leg planted. You turn into it. If you're side on, so you can side kick with your lead leg, you turn and you're into your back leg side kick. It's just turning with no preliminary step necessary, as you would have to open the hips to throw a regular, like straight towards the opponent back leg side kick. So I think a lot of the people who use side kicks regularly are going to be using a more side-on stance, and they're going to use the turning side kick and the back kick more than they would see fit to use a rear leg side kick. But I suppose someone who uses a very square stance already could benefit from using the rear leg side kick as a straight-up weapon. But this does bring us on to another idea, which is that of secondary kicks, which is what I consider the side kick to really excel as. And back fists I also consider like a secondary weapon. It's something where you wouldn't throw it out of your stance, but I mean, maybe you would, but like, let's say I wouldn't throw it out of my stance, but after I've missed a kick that I do often throw out of my stance, that secondary attack is there. So a really good example would be Zhang Weili. If you watch her early UFC fights before she becomes like a banger overnight, she does a lot of step up inside low kicks. And then when she misses and the opponent tries to come back in, she's already side on, so she side kicks him with the same leg. She fights very square, and then she blades herself by missing the kick. She also has some other cool ways she does it, like she'll step sideways to her left with her right foot behind her left and like do a little sidestep, but instead of going the full way with the sidestep, she stops the sidestep short so that she's in like a little bladed stance and then side kicks. It's very clever. If you watch really good Sanshao guys try to get to a bladed stance, they have some clever ways of doing it. But the rear leg side kick is exactly the same thing. If you miss a calf kick, most common attack in MMA right now, and the guy pulls his leg away, like Zombie did to Dan Ige, and ruined his confidence in the low kick, side kicks right there afterwards with the right leg. And another great example, of course, would be Dave LeDuc with his LeDuc kick, which is where he throws the right low kick, does a big step in to do it, and then the next time he steps in to kick the right low kick, and the opponent picks their leg up to check, standing on one leg. He swings his leg around with his keeping it coiled at the knee, so he goes through but doesn't kick the actual target, and brings his knee to the inside and side kicks the guy in the face. It's great. Go watch a Dave LeDuc highlight and you'll see plenty of that. Another great example of a side kick, which you will probably never see used effectively, is the Yoko Tobigeri, the jumping side kick, which in like classical Japanese karate texts from the 50s, they're like, you just step out to the side and jump and then side kick the guy in the temple from the side with your right leg. And the one person I've seen do this is Raymond Daniels. He did it in Glory. He tried to do it after knocking a guy down. The referee did the count, and then he went, okay, fight. And Raymond Daniels ran in off to the left side of his opponent, who was like, what the fuck? And tried to jump past him and kick him in the temple at the same time. It was very cool. Cheers, Peter. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. I'm going to finish this article on, the title is Dick Moves and Gimmicky Bullshit. We're talking about like arm cranks, buggy chokes, all kinds of weird shit that happened specifically last week. And I'm going to get that up for the Patreon boys. If you want to support the podcast, get in on the extra shit we write and be a boy, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I am your boy Jack Slack, pulling bottom Mount Bless.